Hey, everybody. Welcome to Moment of Clarity. Hope you're doing well out there. Good to see y'all. Please take a second to share this. Click subscribe, click thumbs up. I got a great guest for you coming up in a minute. I hope you like the new background. All right. I spent tens of dollars on this. Okay. I actually, it's hand sewn by child laborers in actually Britain. It's kind of a reverse child labor program. We try and make child laborers in Bangladesh or Vietnam, etc., feel good about themselves by exploiting children in the United Kingdom. So we've been doing that, and it's had really positive effects. The kids in the kids that are working very hard in Bangladesh and other countries, Indonesia, they've been big fans of it. Big fans. We have like a pen pal program so they can talk to each other. It's going great. Anyway, tens of dollars have been dumped into this incredible new high level Hollywood level background. So I hope you like it. All right. Yeah. Take a second to share this. We're going to get into a very important topic here in a minute. What's going on in Colombia, which has had major protests, major strikes. Also, on top of that, unfortunately, a lot of killing that has gone on. But we're going to get into all the details because I don't consider myself highly informed on that subject. So I figured let's bring on someone who is. By the way, if you donate in the super chat or if you donate at Rockfin right now, all those donations go to people who are struggling, those in need. So if you donate, that's where those dollars go. You can also donate, whether you're watching this live or not, you can donate on Venmo. At Lee Camp is the name. And all of those donations go to people who are struggling right now. So, and we get more into the details of that on the weekend live stream on Sunday nights. All right, though, let's get into the guest. And I think I'm also going to cover another topic after the guest. So hang in there for that as well. But this is an incredible activist, incredible person who does a lot of great work. And she's with the Washington office on Latin America, not connected to the United States government, which you're probably not surprised with that, because if you know me and you know what I do, then no one from the United States government wants to come on my show or wants to talk to me. So you probably could have guessed that part. But without further ado, here is Jimena Sanchez. Hello.
Hi, Lee. Good to see you.
Hi, good to see you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me. So there's some not so great things, but also some kind of wonderful things going on in Colombia, which has seen a big uptick in protests, in people marching, in a national strike. And so I wish you, I'm just going to give you the floor here and let you explain to me and to everyone listening and watching what has been going on in Colombia.
Okay, well, you're right in saying that it's the good and the bad all mixed together. Unfortunately, Colombia always has wonderful things and horrible things all mixed in one. But I'll start with the bad part, which is that basically you've had a national strike since April 28th, and this is not a new strike. This was a strike that actually started in 2019, but was tampered down and basically stopped because of the pandemic and the extreme restrictions that Colombia put on all sorts of mobility and so forth. But the issues that started in 2019, were left simmering and actually made worse during the pandemic. So those issues were basically that the current ruling party, the Centro Democrático, run by President Iván Duque, basically sees that his role as a government is only to serve the interests of the wealthy, the elite, and basically the neoliberal policies of the country and not anyone else. Also, he sees that his role is to do away with the historic peace accord that was signed in 2016 after more than 50 years of internal conflict, which was quite an achievement.
Peace accord between the government and FARC, right?
Yeah, so the government and the largest guerrilla group, the FARC. He has done everything, basically, since he's been in power, to undermine it, but present to the international community as if he is advancing it. So
Undermine the peace agreement. So yeah, they agreed to these terms, and basically the government has not met any of them, right?
yes. So, for example, part of the peace agreement is about drug. How do you address the illegal cultivation of coca and the drug trade? And one of the agreements was made that aerial fumigation, basically with glyphosate, was going to be stopped, and a whole series of other programs that lead people to stop growing coca would be put in place, like having roads, having an economy for local campesinos, giving them protection, giving them basic services. So instead of doing that, what he's been doing is pushing to go back to these militaristic policies.
Right. I think I covered recently that program, which seems so insane, but it's been pushed by the United States to dump Roundup herbicide, which we now clearly know is cancerous, just throughout the farmlands to supposedly stop the drug trade, but in fact it stops all kinds of things. It destroys all kinds of crops, all kinds of life. It gives people cancer, etc. And now Biden, and I think the program had somewhat declined, and now Biden is pushing to bring it all back.
Yeah, so the Colombian government wants it to come all back, but they have the problem that their own courts are saying that they can't do it because of health reasons. So they're trying to come up with decrees and things to advance it. So people were pissed off about that. They were also mad about all of these labor reforms that the Duque administration had started to put in place, like being able to contract people just for an hour, basically impeding collective bargaining and all of those things. And during the pandemic, special powers were given so the president could pass through different legislation without going through the usual standard overview that the Congress does. And they tried to push these things through during that time. At the same time that they were pushing all these things that were basically detrimental to the working class, Afro-Colombian, indigenous, and rural peoples, they also basically put out a relief package that in theory was supposed to help people affected by the pandemic, but in practice reached almost nobody. It reached almost nobody because of the high level of corruption that exists in the way that aid and contracts are given out in Colombia, where basically you give it to your friends and they give it to their friends. And the independent agencies in Colombia reported more than 1,000 cases of corruption of these funds. So all of this was simmering. And the response had been in 2019 to go in with full-on repression against protesters, lots of protesters killed, using the notorious MOC, which is the anti-riot police, basically to go in and attack people while they're protesting as if they're attacking guerrillas or, basically taking a war tactic against people. Right. So people were mad about that too, but it all kind of simmered because of the restrictions. And then boom, basically in April, the president decides to introduce another reform, which was a tax reform that would basically have placed taxes on all of the basic goods and products that regular people need to survive. So in a pandemic where you had basically 8 million people out of work, another 10 million in the informal economy that hadn't been able to go out and be part of the informal economy, people got really mad and they started protesting. So there are multiple levels of this protest. One is there is a coordinating committee, which is basically all of the major labor unions in Colombia that called for the protests and called for a national strike. And then you have multiple other movements throughout Colombia, like the indigenous movement that had been doing protests for a long time. They've made more than 1,000 agreements with the Colombian government that they have not met. And then under this government, the Duque government, the government refuses to even meet with them. Does not even consider them worth meeting with, and only send the military after them, basically.
And Colombia has some of the highest levels of assassinations of activists and environmental activists, correct?
Yes. So since the signing of the peace accord, more than 1,000 social leaders, so that would be labor leaders, land rights leaders, Afro-Colombian indigenous campesino leaders have been killed. And last year in 2020, even during the pandemic, when supposedly nobody was supposed to go anywhere, you had the highest number of those social leaders killed. So you almost had 200 social leaders killed, which, called into question, how is it possible that all of these illegal groups killing people are able to get through all these police checkpoints? So that's something that really should be considered there.
Right.
So you had this level of violence that had been there by, the institutions to begin with. And you also had an increasing number of massacres taking place and the government basically justifying them. So you had situations where a lot of youth were killed and the government was like, well, who knows, they're killing each other. Like basically not guaranteeing the life and safety of anyone and also not caring about it, like just being blatantly, completely expressing lack of empathy. And then you had a minister of defense defending any military action where children are killed and things like that. So all of this boiled up together and it just exploded on April 28th. People are like, we don't care about the pandemic. We want things to change. So the government responded wonderfully. They went in with multiple force. And then they started this whole international campaign to say that, well, they're attacking everybody with military force. In Cali, for example, which is one of the largest cities, the military actually sort of took over the civilian institutions. So it was kind of like a mini takeover.
Really?
You just had more than 2,300 abuses. You had rapes take place of women, more than 16 women publicly raped by members of the public forces. A lot of this filmed because everybody had their cell phones out. And so all of this circulating all around and so forth. And you also had last Sunday, for example, a group of peaceful indigenous people going to Cali to basically serve as like peaceful human shields for the protesters in Cali. They enter into Cali and immediately, you see this on video, there's the police and there are these guys in civilian dress shooting at them. And they basically wounded 10 indigenous leaders. And the government goes out and says, well, the indigenous people should go back to their homes, basically their reserves, as if they're not citizens of Colombia. And then you have a lot of high profile people who are friends of the government saying basically like that the indigenous are terrorists. It became this whole racist thing. And then indigenous people blaming them for having been shot at. So this is kind of the situation that we're in.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. And through all this, the United States has, at times helped the government, but just in general, never, it seems to be no condemnation, no, withdrawing of support. And meanwhile, they act like Venezuela is the real problem.
Yeah, so the United States, I would give them a 2 out of 10, if that's being nice.
That's being very nice.
There was a unique tweet from, it's not even worth mentioning. The United States is the #1 provider of security assistance to Colombia and training to its armed forces. We have conditions on that aid through the Leahy Amendment, where it very specifically says that armed forces should not be killing civilians and things like that, should actually be protecting them or colluding with illegal groups, which they now call successor paramilitary groups, but basically paramilitary groups. And, interestingly, those conditions at this time don't apply to this anti-riot police, which I find to be very interesting. So what we've seen is 55 Democrats and even Senator Leahy calling for a review of that aid and an extension, and basically for denouncing the violence and stopping the violence and calling for major reforms. However, we're not hearing that from the Biden administration. I suspect that a lot of that has to do with the fact that Colombia has sold itself to the United States, and the United States has very much accepted it as their #1 ally in the region, especially against the crisis taking place in Venezuela. Colombia has the biggest bulk of Venezuelans that have fled Venezuela. They claim themselves to be the big humanitarians because they don't kick them out of the country, but at the same time, they're really not granting them much or more rights, and that's been another major problem. They don't want to upset Colombia. Colombia has also really pushed a marketing narrative around the world. At first, it was the fault of somehow the dissident FARC and the other guerrilla group, which is mostly in the rural areas, behind all these protests, which is completely not understanding how the Colombian guerrillas work, nor anything that they can prove any evidence of. And then secondly, when that didn't work, they started saying that Venezuela was behind these protests, which
Right.
is absurd.
Right.
I mean, it's ridiculous. At one point, they even compared the situation to what happened in the Capitol here in Washington, saying that their democracy was under attack from these vandals and so forth. And the latest one that they've been saying is that, they uphold human rights, and this is basically a big obstruction to the economy, and that U.S. investment is being affected by all of this. So basically completely ignoring the fact that their own populace is completely in desperate straits, in need of reforms, in need of changes, and, they're just bulldozing on as if that doesn't matter.
I know that this question could take an hour to go through all the details, but if you could give a quick summary of what role the U.S. has played in getting Colombia to this point over the past several decades.
Sure. So in the past 20 years, the United States started with something called Plan Colombia, which was basically an anti-narcotics and military effort to do away with the guerrillas in Colombia. So according to the U.S. governments, including Obama and Biden, this Plan Colombia was a major success because it managed to make the FARC militarily retreat, and they killed a lot of FARC. What you don't hear is that they also killed 6,400 civilians minimally that were basically forced. They were basically killed by soldiers, most of them tortured, some of them even it was targeted killings, like they went after poor people, gay people, people that they thought were undesirable, killed them, then dressed them up as guerrillas, and then presented them as guerrillas killed in combat. So we're not talking about fog of war killings. There were a lot of those too. But this was like deliberate killings. Yeah. Why? Because the US was pressuring so much that they needed to show results in this Plan Colombia. So anyway, the US policy was that until 2016, when a peace accord was signed, and it changed to a predominantly peace agenda and what was known as Peace Colombia, although part of the package, still, half of it at least, continued to be aid for the security services in Colombia and anti-narcotics and these helicopters and things like that, which are really, really expensive. So the U.S. has been completely part of this conflict. I always say the U.S. is the third actor in the conflict, because it's been the one that's sort of been taking sides and also behind a lot of that violence and militarization that we have seen has been completely antithesis of what Colombia needs.
Yeah. And where does it look like the strike is going now? Is it ongoing and the protests are ongoing, or has the attack on them been so aggressive in the past few days that it could start fading?
So on the positive side, we've seen a whole bunch of new movements arise from this that were really kind of quiet and I would say like apathetic. Colombia has been through so much war and so much violence, that basically the urban youth, the more middle class urban youth basically didn't want anything to do with any of these issues. This was something in the rural areas, whatever. We just want to find a way for ourselves. Well, this has shown how the government has been for many years in those rural areas to that other Colombia that hadn't seen it before. And I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. So I predict that, the worst case scenario is that the government is going to declare something called a state of commotion, which is like a state of emergency to justify basically blanketly authorizing all sorts of military control in the country and reforms that would allow them to even get themselves to stay in power longer than they should, because we have elections coming up in 2020, and right now the
Wait,
polls
you said 2020.
I mean 2022,
Okay.
and the polls are saying that the current popularity of the ruling party is very low, and so they're very concerned about that. So that would be the worst case scenario. The more likely scenario is that we're going to see ongoing violence. We're going to see moments where the protests continue, maybe some wins, but it's going to be like this until 2022. The dialogue that is taking place, first of all, the government initially called for a dialogue with all their friends. So the business community, the evangelicals that are very much supporting them, that kind of thing. And, maybe a table here or there meeting with the Civic Strike Committee. Nothing with the indigenous.
Right.
The indigenous Afro, not even part of this. And so that was a total joke. However, the Civic Committee has agreed to take this on. And, they have 16 points of what they want. The first one being implement the peace. And, they're going to try to do that. So there may be lulls in this, as there may be talks. But it's out of even their control. You're seeing neighborhoods where youth have just joined together and for the first time ever been politically active and also responding to what they see as an assault of the state against all of them, which it is. I'm not surprised that you've seen people burning police stations when the police is literally going out and shooting people using live ammunition. And all this stuff.
What, how much hope do you have that the election in 2022 will be legitimate? I know that the elections here in the United States are generally not legitimate, and then we put tons of pressure on other countries in order to rig or pressure their elections, as we've seen in so many Latin American nations. So what are the hopes in Colombia?
Okay, so Colombia needs to diversify its political parties. That's one of the problems. Entry into the political system was a major reason why you've had more than 13 guerrilla groups, because you've normally had two parties that basically just turn one the other, within a range.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Anybody else? So the guerrillas demobilized because they formed a political party, and that political party for the first time had a chance. The last time they demobilized, they assassinated more than 3,000 of their members. So already we're seeing a lot of killings of demobilized FARC. But anyway, the point is that even if we were to have somewhat fair elections, entry into that electoral system is impeded by many things. One is that there are many parts of Colombia where people's votes are just bought because people have zero credibility in the political system. They're like, okay, just give me a refrigerator and I prefer that. I'll give you my vote. There's parts of the country where people are basically threatened into voting for people. There have been very interesting things like that happening. Mm-hmm. And then there's usually a high level of killings of candidates. And so we have to see whether there's a historic pact made with some of the parties, to try to gain more ground. Because unfortunately, the left has always been kind of divided in Colombia. And so, now they're trying to sort of do a pact with some of the moderates to see if they can advance. Because part of the reason that the right won the last time around was that they consolidated. They were like, we may be fewer, but we're putting all of our media behind this, all of our, and they did a lot of disinformation campaigns that and false things. For example, claiming that the peace accord was going to make everybody make their children homosexuals, like ridiculous things like that. Because the peace accord had gender rights in it and recognized that LGBT people were victims of the conflict, which is what a surprise.
Oh dear God.
So they claimed that this, was going to somehow, force this cultural thing on Colombia, and the evangelical churches got behind that and really, really pounded that. And that's how they got a lot of votes, unfortunately. So what I'm saying is that even if we have fair elections, there needs to really be a lot of reforms for those elections to really fairly represent the interests of people, given what the situation is right now.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. For those who want to keep informed or want to help out however they can, where do you recommend they go?
So one of the big problems we've seen is that in the United States, people don't know about all of this going on.
Yep.
It's not getting reported, for many reasons.
Well, because we only cover American media only covers people standing up, striking, protesting in the countries that we want to bring down or collapse. So if you're not in one of those countries, then your protests don't matter.
Yeah, so that's a big thing. And then, so we launched something called Con Líderes Hay Paz, which is a series of podcasts and media kits and social media from the perspective of several Afro-Colombian and indigenous leaders about why they want peace, what they're doing, what's going on in the areas that they live. So, for example, even in the port of Buenaventura, which is the most important port for the U.S.-Colombia Free Trade Agreement, how that free trade agreement is leading to the displacement of Afro-Colombians and how people are trying to fight back and all that. So anyway, I recommend people, basically Google Con Líderes Hay Paz or go to wola.org. You can find that information, and that gives guides for people to be able to contact their member of Congress, do speaking circles about these issues to try to get more people around the country to really bug their members of Congress about this.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Jimena. I really appreciate you being here.
Okay, thank you.
Talk soon.
Bye.
That was Jimena Sanchez with the Washington office on Latin America, not connected to the government here in the United States. She would like everybody to know that. The initials are WOLA if you want to keep up with them. Obviously it's insane what's going on in Colombia. And like I mentioned to her, we don't cover it on our mainstream media because we only cover strikes or protests. Our mainstream media only covers strikes or protests that are going on in countries that we are trying to create regime change in. So you could have a tiny little protest in, like Venezuela, where every country's going to have a protest. So you can have a small little protest in Venezuela, and our media will run up. Oh, my people stand here, look at them protesting in the streets. Holy shit! Meanwhile, there's a massive national strike in Colombia. There's people fighting back, storming the streets, demanding rights, demanding they not be taxed in order to pay off the country's debts because they're already poor and oppressed. And, Rachel Maddow doesn't notice, right? Fox News doesn't notice. CNN doesn't notice. Our political fucking clowns that are in our government pretend that they don't notice. All of that has to be kept quiet because you have a far right-wing garbage government in Colombia, which means our garbage government is like in love. They're like, we just match up so well, our garbage government and your garbage government. So so they're not going to talk about these strikes. They're not going to promote them, but definitely something to keep an eye on, to keep watching the developments, to support. I thought, by the way, for anybody striking or connected to the strikes against McDonald's, solidarity to you. Keep spreading the word about that. I'm going to try and talk more about that on Redacted tonight. I wanted to do one more topic before I say goodbye, because I just love you guys and then want to hang out longer. I thought I'd show you. I thought I'd just go through a little of Marco Rubio's Twitter because why not? He's such a brilliant, informative man that I just thought it'd be good to go through his Twitter and learn a little something, right? He's pocket sized, which is also really nice, right? Travel size. He's like he's that kind of like tiny adorable evil, because often evil comes in large sizes, but like the little travel size evil is nice. Sometimes you like to have a little tiny pocket sized villain you can keep with you for whenever you need villainy. You're like, oh, I got it, and you just reach in your pocket and there he is. It's fucking, he's cute. You know, it's like if the Smurfs had an arch nemesis that was a Smurf. You know, they had the big Gargamel, but if it was like a tiny evil Smurf, there was probably an episode about that, wasn't there? You know, some evil clone Smurf gets in there. Anyway, so let's just and speaking of someone who wholeheartedly supports the right-wing murderous government in Colombia, here's Marco Rubio. Okay, I'm not going to play his clips because I don't want to hear his face talk. But so first of all, his Twitter starts off with some quote from the Bible because, you know, it's always good to start off with a quote from an imaginary book of you know, fairy tales that, you know, tells you about like people living inside whales and things like that. So he starts off with a quote from his favorite fairy tale book. And then he gets into the next tweet is the president of the United States has decided to allow American investors to continue to fund companies the Chinese military is using to build weapons designed to one day kill Americans and defeat us in war. Because Marco Rubio is trying to stop China. Okay, because China equals evil. Because I am dumb. And I think that a country is one thing. Everybody in it is one thing. So China equals evil. And yeah, so he's trying to stop Americans from being able to invest in Chinese weapons contractors, which here's the thing. I actually agree with that as long as it's all weapons contractors. War profiteering should not be a thing. How about that for a start? But no, Marco Rubio's fine with our war profiteering. He's fine with funding our weapons contractors, our weapons that are used around the world. And by the way, our weapons are sold between countries all of the fucking time. So there are many countries that could one day be at war with the United States that have U.S. weapons. But Marco Rubio doesn't care about those. He only cares about, you know, the ones that go to Chinese weapons, because those are the bad guy, evil weapons. Not to mention the fact that if we were to actually get into war with China, like a real war, then we would all kill ourselves with nuclear weapons. So there is that. There is the whole nuclear Armageddon thing. Marco Rubio has no problem with pushing us to the brink of that, right? Because he's willing to continually, you know, push this belligerence, push this, you know, hatred of the great other, the great China that's going to get us and hurt us. And by the way, all of this agreed with by, although he's trying to yell at the president, right? He started that tweet as being like the president. They agree on all this shit, right? The Democrats and Republicans agree on, you know, making China the great new villain, pushing us towards nuclear war. They're totally fine with that. Totally. They every time they talk about China being an evil villain, they circle jerk together because they love that shit. It just makes them very happy and erect. It makes the women erect too, which is weird. So yeah, he's and you know, also I love the fact that Mr. Capitalist. I mean, they're all Mr. and Mrs. Capitalist, right? All of our politicians fucking love capitalism. It makes them hard as well. But Mr. Capitalist here is upset that investors are investing in Chinese weapons companies. And it's like, dude, that's your economic system that you love, that you support and act like it's fine. It is the economic system where anybody can invest in killing others. Like, that's how this system works. But apparently you have a problem with it. Really, really, Marco Rubio. I thought you loved this shit. I thought you loved that there's people profiting off of fucking war and death and misery and starvation and hunger and fucking disease. And did I mention death? Because if you support capitalism, then that's what you're supporting. But right here in this tweet, he's saying, "Oh no, I don't like capitalism over there. I don't like it in this little particular area. I don't like capitalism when it funds the thing I don't like. I like when it invests in that thing, and I don't like it. But I like it for all the other things. But not over here. Not in this little thing. Don't do it over there." All right, let's see his next tweet, which I'm sure will be far more informed and ingenious and all that shit. Once enough Hamas rockets have been destroyed, enough of their terrorist infrastructure has been eliminated, and their ability to claim a political victory has been denied, then I too will join the calls for a ceasefire now. He's saying he will join a ceasefire, a call for ceasefire in Israel once those things have happened. Let me fix this tweet for him in a more accurate manner. Once enough children have been destroyed, enough of the children's infrastructure has been eliminated, and the children's ability to claim a political victory has been denied, then I too will join the calls for a ceasefire now. Because what is Israel bombing the shit out of? Mainly children. Children, innocent people. They're largely not hitting Hamas rockets, and not to mention, I believe, I'm actually gonna quote Joe Biden here. This is one of the things I agree with Joe Biden on. I'm just changing one word. He said Israel has the right to defend itself. I believe Palestine has the right to defend itself. So I'm agreeing with Joe Biden there. I'm just changing one word. I'm agreeing with most of it. Most of the sentence, 70% of that sentence, we are fist bumping. Yeah, man. I'm just changing one word. So I got the idea from him. I wouldn't even thought of that. I wouldn't even thought of that. Except he said Israel has the right to defend itself. Palestine has the right to defend itself. I'm just changing one word, and then I think he's totally right. He's totally right. But yeah, so and again, Hamas rockets. What have they? So Israel has killed over 200 people so far. I don't keep up with that. I don't have like a rolling tally, like car miles on my computer, but it's over 200. Almost entirely innocent people, and almost entirely, not almost entirely, but God knows how many women and children. I mean, a lot, dozens and dozens and dozens. And they blew up a press office, right, that housed Al Jazeera and the AP, the Associated Press. And they knew it housed, they knew they were bombing a press building. They knew they blew up a 12-story press building because they called those offices to tell them beforehand, you have a few minutes to get out. So get out of the building immediately, and then we're going to blow it up. So they knew they were committing a war crime. They knew ahead of time, and they called and said, hey, we're getting ready to commit a war crime. You guys might want to get the fuck out of there. Yeah. No, grab your shit. No, I wouldn't pack a bag. You don't have time for that. I just grab all your shit and get out. Because, yeah, we're going to commit a war crime. We're just feeling it. We're just feeling it. We had a couple of margaritas. We're just feeling it. We had a bottle of Manischewitz, just feeling like committing some war crimes. So, yeah, you guys should get the fuck out of there. Because it's going to get ugly soon. Even though listen, I know you're with the AP. I know you guys do our propaganda work most of the time. I mean, I've read it. You guys do a great job on all that propaganda work most of the time. But the thing is, you're in Gaza, and so you're showing footage of like where our rockets are landing sometimes, and we don't want people to know that. And so we're gonna, and also Al Jazeera is there, so we're gonna bomb the whole building. I know you've done a lot of propaganda for us. I get it. We're still gonna blow the fuck out of your building. So yeah, you should hurry up and get out of there. And no, I'm not calling on a phone from the 1990s. Oh, why is my pinky out? Oh, you're right. There you go. So yeah, they knew they were committing a war crime, and they did it anyway. And this is who Marco Rubio is supporting. This is obviously who also most of the Democrats are supporting. Very few of the Democrats have even called for a ceasefire. Some of them have. And Joe Biden and the U.S. have blocked the call by the UN for several days on calling for a ceasefire, and they were the only ones blocking it, the only country blocking it. So yeah, so Marco Rubio's agreeing with, right? All these people all fucking agree on almost all of it. There were a few Democrats that said we need to stop the next shipment of weapons to Israel. But even they have kind of backed off. They were like, hey, stop those shipments. Oh, okay, I said what I could. I don't know what else I can do. I tweeted it. That's it. I tweeted it. There's nothing more I can do after that. So then Marco Rubio continues with his terrorist Hamas. Terrorist Hamas uses civilians as human shields. So this is now he's in that tweet, he's supporting this hilariously fake talking point propaganda that all of us, anybody who's like fucking read 3 articles knows is bullshit. The whole human shields thing. You have people living in an open air prison. They can't leave. They can't get out. They can't get away. There are very few, if any, bomb shelters. The city looks like rubble, like all of the time, even before these latest bombs hit, because guess what? They don't have the building supplies to repair after the last reign of terror from Israel. So the whole human shields thing is horseshit. This is a relatively tiny area that Israel bombing the fuck out of, and people can't get away. And so Israel just bombs the fuck out of them, kills innocent civilians, doesn't give a shit. On top of that, if this were true, if this idea of the human shields from Hamas were true, then explain the Great March of Return, right? You can't. The Great March of Return happened over, it was over many months. It was thousands of Palestinians going up to the border, and Israeli snipers, IDF snipers, shooting and killing many, dozens, hundreds were shot and killed, and many were hit in ways that didn't kill them, but were seriously maimed, seriously injured. And many of these were children. They were old women. They were people that were clearly infirmed in wheelchairs. Everyone was clearly unarmed. The worst level of weapon they saw was a fucking rock and a slingshot. Yeah, shoot that kid because he's got a slingshot with a pebble in it. Fucking kill that 8-year-old because he's got a slingshot. Yeah, and also shoot that one over there. He's got a yo-yo. That one's holding a yo-yo. There's 2 of them over there playing paddleball. Shoot them too. You don't know what they might do with that paddleball. You never know. You never know. Yeah, that one's got a boomerang. Kill him. I mean, it's so flyingly fucked. So the point is that they're intentionally killing these people in the Great March of Return. What makes you think it's any different now? Why would you ever believe this human shield garbage argument? But Marco Rubio is he's a right-wing dumpster fire of a human being, but most of the things I'm saying are also agreed with by almost the entirety of the Republicans, most of the Democrats. So this is not just him, right? This is one of these issues that show you that the two parties are not two parties, right? They are one party. When it comes to Israel and so many other topics that I don't need to reel them all off right now, but when it comes to massive foreign policy or almost all foreign policy, the two parties are one party. And so Marco Rubio is doing an excellent job in his little Twitter feed. By the way, I'm not covering his Twitter feed because it was spectacular today, because it was important today, because I was just like, let's grab a random Twitter feed and let's go through it and see just how much sewage, like rancid, lumpy, like congealed sewage with the flies that are coming to the sewage just like die from the stink, and you just see them, they're excited at first, and you see them just spiral down into it because they're like, holy, it's like sewage that has gone bad. That's Marco Rubio's Twitter feed. It's sewage beyond its expiration date, so that the flies just die midair and face plant into the sewage. That's his Twitter feed, and so I figured let's just go through that. More pro-Hamas garbage. I mean, sorry, not more pro-Israel garbage. Part of this is to just continually call Hamas terrorist, right? But the more accurate definition would be the Israeli Defense Force is terrorist, right? Terrorist IDF. That would be more accurate because they are quite literal. I mean, they committed a war crime of bombing, obliterating the media in Gaza And they did it on like fucking television. Like you can go watch it. You can go watch it right now and go, wow, that's a fucking war crime. And they know. So they are a terrorist organization, the IDF. And yet Marco Rubio wants to continue putting out. I mean, he gets, and how much money does he get from either Israel or Israel supporters, these very high level bankers, lobbyists, hedge fund managers, or whatever that, say, hey, here's the thousands of dollars we'll give you for your campaign, or we'll give to your super PAC, or $1 million we'll give to your super PAC. And in exchange, you get to say Israel propaganda. And he's like, okay, cool. I'm just a little villainy guy. I don't give a shit. Okay, awesome. You can carry me around in your pocket in case you need a villain on the fly. He says, blame terrorist Hamas for the death and suffering of civilians. They use civilian buildings as launch sites for rocket attacks on Israel. Besides the fact this is just a lie, he acts as if Hamas has some kind of like large, like Pentagon where they should be launching the rockets from. Like what does he think they fucking have? He thinks they have like aircraft carriers or some shit. Like they're not allowed to have and don't have helicopters, jets, ships, fucking MRAPs, tanks. They don't have any of that shit. So what is it you think they are? You think they've got some sort of military bases? You fucking idiot. All right. Well, that was from his press secretary or something. Almost 2 years ago, I called for targeted 21st century industrial policy to counter China. That means economic war against China. And I outlined the way forward again yesterday. He's like priding himself on how well he did because he did it 2 years ago. Hey, 2 years ago, I was creating propaganda against China, and I'm still doing it now. Look at me, Mom. Two years ago, I was full of shit, and I'm still full of shit today. Awesome. Here's a video of me being full of shit 2 years after I started being full of shit. I mean, it's more than 2 years. He's been full of shit forever, but Apple lectures Americans, but does the bidding of Beijing because they want access to Chinese customers and slave labor. Woke hypocrisy at its worst. Speaking of hypocrisy, this motherfucker supports slave labor all over the place. He supports slave labor in our prisons in the United States. He supports slave labor. Like, where the fuck are his clothes? I mean, he fucking loves slave labor, but no, he's upset with the slave labor in China, which, by the way, I haven't seen any proof that there's any slave labor in China. Now, what there is people working for fucking pennies, hence the Foxconn factories that Apple used to source their iPhones from that had the suicide nets around them. That wasn't because the people were slaves. That was because the people were fucking desperate for a few pennies to survive. So guess what that's called? That's not called slavery. That's called economic force. People doing things they don't want to do because of economic force. And guess what, Marco Rubio? That kind of shit goes on in the United States too. Like all of the time. People doing stuff they don't want to do because of economic force. But right-wingers especially, although I guess it's true for liberals too, and libertarians, they love to act like economic force isn't a thing, right? If you just let everything go wild, if there were no regulations, then everybody be free. Yeah, you'd be free except for economic force. You'd be free to desperately take jobs that you didn't want in order to survive, which many people are doing now. But by saying, let's get rid of all regulation, what little regulation there is, what little remaining regulation there is in the workplace is the tiny things that help workers, these tiny remainder of things that help workers to, not be able to be easily sexually harassed if it comes out, if they're able to reveal it or, now, there's obviously people violating all these regulations in various ways, but at least there's a way that it at times can be stopped. But anyway, I'm getting way off the tracks here. But little Marco Rubio wants to say that he's very upset with Apple because Apple uses slave labor in China. Now, the truth is there are tons of companies doing business in China. And in a perfect world, we wouldn't have Wall Street. We wouldn't have the business community because we wouldn't have capitalism destroying our world. But in a less perfect world where we were still here in capitalism, but we had gotten rid of toxic nationalism, then you could have people doing business wherever the fuck they want because we should all be cooperating globally to make for a better future instead of trying to crush and kill other countries because they were born at a different little location on the soil of the earth. Oh, you were born slightly over there because, and it really, there's a lot of racism wrapped up in this as well. It's right. It's hatred of Asian people, and that's why it's a lot easier and a lot more common for the United States to make non-white countries their enemies. Right now, Russia is an exception to some degree, but they're far quicker to bomb, to invade, to put economic war on countries that are not white, right? You go after Latin America, you go after the Middle East, you go after Asia, North Korea. So there's a lot of racism wrapped up in it as well, as we see with the Israel issue, right? You've got the white people versus the non-white people. And guess what? Marco Rubio sides with all of the white people. Anyway, let's see if we got one more or two. Oh, God, dude, he's doing more fucking Bible quotes. The idea that you act like, blessed be the Lord day by day, God our salvation who carries us. Dude, if there were a God, do you think he'd give a flying shit about, do you think he'd like you? You are like, what kind of fucking Lord would be like, hey, that little tiny rich, racist dude I'm really into him. I mean, what a good guy. He's just a great guy to be around. No, the little one, that guy, the little one. Oh, he's just what a great dude. He's just, he's spending his time tweeting to his whatever million followers about how Israel should kill more children. I mean, what a good guy. God, I'm so glad I made that little guy. So glad I did. Yeah, dude, the Lord would be real into you if there were a Lord. Anyway, Israel is facing God, he doesn't even know how to speak. Israel is facing an over 3,100 rocket barrage. Israel is facing a barrage of over 3,100 rockets. Me no likey words. Come on, Marco, get it together. Right now, they need our support, not doubts over the U.S. commitment to their ability to defend themselves. There, yet again, I agree. Just change the word to Palestinians, and I agree with everything you just said. They deserve our support in defending themselves against one of the most powerful militaries in the world. I totally agree. Let's see. That was more God stuff. Okay. Anyway. Yeah. 3,100 rockets that killed 5 people as compared to the well over 200 that Israel or the IDF has killed so far. And he's concerned about the 5. He's worried about the 5. It's, yeah. what more is there to say? What a sad fucking human being. But again, most of what I went through, the Democrats agree with. There's a few of them saying otherwise, but many of those are not really standing up against it. And they're just going to keep standing up for the oppressing force, supporting the oppressing force in Israel, supporting the Goliath against David. I mean, yeah, it's real tough to support Goliath against David. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. For those of you who donated, all the money is going to those in need. If you're not watching this live, you can also donate on Venmo at Lee Camp. And we'll talk more about that on the live stream Sunday night. Please check out my 2 podcasts, Government Secrets and Common Censored. Also, there's a new Redacted Tonight every Friday. You can get that at portable.tv. I have a new website at leecamp.com. You can check that out. And I do these almost every single weekday, except sometimes. Keep fighting, everybody.